All right, welcome back to Inside College Basketball now with Jon Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by BYU head coach Kevin Young. Kevin, welcome. The million-dollar question, obviously everybody wants to know in Provo, is this: where was the Young family vacation spot this summer?
Oh man, we were like Wild West this summer. We went to Montana a couple of times. Took a little trip up to Wyoming, so we were channeling our inner cowboy.
Yeah, I have never really spent a lot of time in that area of the country. I had a wedding once in Idaho, but what do you do on vacation in Montana and Wyoming?
Man, we were in the middle of nowhere. It was great. We were doing a little trout fishing, a little four-wheeling, hiking, just enjoying each other's company.
Well, you're a long ways from the rigors of the Big 12 when those are your surroundings, but it's amazing now, just about 18 months into the job, how the trajectory of BYU's program has changed under your watch. Kevin, I'm curious, what are the biggest things you know about being BYU's head coach today that you maybe didn't know when you took the job?
Man, it's a long list of things. I think honestly, just having an understanding of I think what's to come. Last year there was so much uncertainty for me in terms of, knowing how to get through not just the Big 12, but just a college basketball season as a head coach.
Yeah.
It's so different from the NBA just in terms of the structure of the season. Obviously, a lot less games, a lot more practice, how to manage all that with the recruiting and things like that. So I think, man, just an overall understanding of, what to expect and kind of just how to do the job.
And how different was it for you to be in college basketball versus the NBA where you came from?
In some aspects, it was wildly different. And, once you get to the games, obviously there's basketball is basketball, but the two halves, the rules, the physicality, the officiating, the spacing, even within basketball, there was a lot of things that were wildly different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I said, in some ways, you felt comfortable. Well, once we started getting into game planning and how we're going to beat this specific team, that's where I felt like, I was doing the same things I was doing in the NBA. And then once you really start breaking down, the nuances of it, it's a little bit different.
Kevin, I remember when we talked right when you got the job, you spoke about how you thought maybe the college landscape, only playing 35, 40 games, was more conducive maybe to having a young family. How much did you feel that aspect of things in the 1 year of college that you spent at BYU?
It's been good, on a personal level. I know every situation is different, but obviously, that's one of the reasons BYU was so attractive to me. Big family environment out here. People make it a priority. And so definitely had my family around more, the games and things like that. And college atmosphere just kind of is welcoming in that respect. Not that the NBA is not, it's just a little bit harder. But, what I really found, man, was I'm busier doing this job, but I'm at home more, if that makes sense. Just the travel is a lot less. And, there's give and takes with both of them, but we found our footing here and have enjoyed it.
And the one thing that only matters, we know, with coaches is how much they win. And you had obviously a great season last year. You led BYU to the Sweet 16. You guys lost to Alabama. You signed a long-term contract extension, after last season to stay at BYU. Did you ever consider, after the success you had, looking at maybe something professionally in a head coaching capacity?
I think, I've been doing this a long time now, and I think you always have to just have an understanding of the landscape of the profession, right? And so, I've never been one to box myself in anything. And so, there was different things that were, explored here, there, and all that. But that's no different than any other off season, for me and many coaches, I would say. So we feel great about being able to be here at BYU. Love the administration. On the athletic side, our president of the university is a great guy, and so feel really fortunate that we're hopefully going to be here for a long time.
And the buzz has never been greater for BYU basketball than it is right now, and that all really changed in the middle of February for you guys. You were 15-8 on February 8th last season, and then you won 9 games in a row. What changed with your team during that stretch?
Sports is it's very fickle. Ball goes this way one time, and it can change the whole trajectory of a game or a season. And so, even when we were, quote unquote, struggling a little bit, I never felt like we were too far away. We were in every game for the most part. We had a couple we took on the chin, but I felt like we were right there. And so we just had to keep showing up, keep working every day, trying to continue to get better. I had to learn a lot. That was the one part of that streak we went on. We had to figure out how to close games out better. I had to do a better job putting our team in position to win at the end. And so again, that was part of my learning experience, and all the credit goes to our guys for just hanging in there. And we ended up playing, we had a huge rotation last year, played 11, 12 guys some nights. And so it was really everybody stepping up, doing what they needed to do to help us win games.
And obviously, one epic win that BYU fans will remember, not just obviously in the present, but also in the future, was that epic win over Wisconsin in the round of 32. You guys got a key stop late in the game to advance to the Sweet 16. Where does winning that game rank in terms of all the moments you've had in basketball?
I mean, it was awesome. It was awesome because we had quite a few fans there. That was something that I probably didn't really factor in to the taking this job, was just the amount of people that really want to see BYU do well, right?
Yeah.
In terms of former athletes and just the amount of people, right, that were just excited for that win made it really cool. And for that group of guys to do something, that hasn't been done here in a long time, was really happy for them, and just happy for the whole university.
And then obviously you went to Newark and you played an Alabama team that had a historical night shooting the basketball. Take us inside the locker room after the run was over in the Sweet 16. What was the message to your team?
First of all the credit goes to Nate Oates and his group. I mean, they played a tremendous game. We didn't do a good enough job of adjusting, so they kicked our butt, and got to give them all the credit for that. So, just talk to our group about, how proud that I was of how much buy-in they had, with the new coach, new coaching staff, new teammates, and they all came together and they did it. Like I said, where it wasn't just one guy, it wasn't 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys. I mean, it was literally the whole group made us collectively better, and that was really rewarding, and that's kind of what I share with them.
And then obviously you turn the page and you start looking forward to this season and the group that obviously you're about to coach. When you wrap things up after the Alabama game and you started looking ahead to 25-26, you knew you had Aj Dybantsa coming in. But aside from that, what else did you want to add to the roster?
Well, once we got AJ, we kind of had to push pause a little bit and kind of reevaluate where we felt like what we needed to do. Put a team together around the guys we had coming in, right? I think roster composition is arguably more important than the talent acquisition, if that makes sense. I think we had to, obviously Richie was a huge component. He had an opportunity to go, probably get drafted in this past NBA draft. He wanted to come back and, I think win at a high level, number one, and then number 2, up his draft stock for this coming draft. And so I think the combination of feeling like you had Richie and AJ there, and obviously Kate coming back, felt really strong about, that trio in our starting group. And then, we obviously needed somebody to come in. We had some uncertainty at the point guard position. Once Yegor decided to go to the NBA, Dallin Hall transferred. Rob Wright becomes available in the portal. Felt like he was a great point guard to come in and kind of steady the ship. And then from that point, man, we really had to think long and hard about what else we wanted to add. So I think where we ended up was athleticism, shooting, and defense. And we feel really good about the guys we brought in. One guy in particular who's looked unbelievable in the preseason here is Kennard Davis, transfer from Southern Illinois. I mean, he's a grown man, knows how to play. And he's got his hands full every day with Rob and AJ in practice, and he guards those guys extremely well. So I think his kind of prototype of player is kind of, we try to go out and get multiple guys like that, but he's certainly leading the charge right now in that space.
What are the biggest differences between last season's roster and the one that you're about to coach?
Look, on paper, I mean, obviously we're more talented, but that doesn't mean anything. I've saw that for years in the NBA. I was on multiple teams that had all the talent in the world, and that doesn't always mean you're going to be a better team than you were the year before. And so I think, number one, we are longer. We're a lot more athletic, and we have overall more talent. Okay, that's the good news. What this team's going to have to do, like that team last year did, was come together and play as a unit and share the basketball, which can be sometimes a little bit trickier to do when you add more talent. I saw that firsthand, like I said, in the NBA world. And so that's kind of been the message with this group. The good news for me and our coaching staff is really, really good group of guys. Love the character. Love coaching these guys already, and excited to see them kind of gel and come together.
And the focal point of the group's obviously going to be Aj Dybantsa. You knew obviously his talent level when you recruited him. What are the biggest things, though, that have been illuminated since you've been around him every day?
Well, I think AJ and our team are on a really fortunate position because, AJ gets a lot of the headlines, but then, I see it every day. Richie Saunders just continues to show up and just make play after play after play, right? And so I think the world's going to be opened up for him and Rob if a lot of people are focusing on AJ and those guys can do their thing. But AJ's just he's the whole package, bottom line. He's got the size. He's got the athleticism. Where I've been really impressed with him is his mentality and his maturity. I think that's been a common thread for me when I've coached really great players at the next level, is they all have the mind and the mindset, along with the physical attributes and the competitive drive that he has. So, the maturity piece is probably the one that stood out, more than anything, which has been really fun.
If there was one player, past or present, who Aj Dybantsa most reminded you of, who would it be?
I mean, I just go on personal reference points. I had multiple series against Paul George when he was in his prime. AJ reminds me of him. Just they're built similar. They both are really good two-way players. I think they both are underrated, like playmakers in terms of passing and so forth. And so he reminds me a lot of Paul George, but there's, he's a combination of a lot of different guys. And I know he prides himself on just being his own man out there. And, but at the same time, really being a student of the game and learning from all these other great players.
You referenced Richie Saunders a number of times here in this chat, and last year he emerged into one of the best players in the Big 12, and he averaged over 20 points per game in the NCAA tournament. What could happen for him now that he can obviously have some of the pressure taken off of him because other people on the opposing team are going to be so focused on players like Aj Dybantsa?
I think he's learning that. I know him and I have had a lot of discussions about, what it looks like for him this year compared to last year. I've been really happy just with his ability to kind of block some of that out, honestly, and just come in and lead by example. But look, man, it reminds me of when I was with the Suns and we traded for this guy named Kevin Durant. And then I remember Devin Booker telling me, man, I've never got so many wide open catch and shoot threes in my life because everyone's worried about Kev. And so I kind of even seen that here early on. It'll be interesting when we start playing other teams, what they choose to do in terms of their defensive assignments. But I think it's going to open up for Richie for sure. I mean, it's growing pains at the same time. He may not get some of the shots early on that he was used to. We got to kind of work through all that, which we're currently doing. And the thing that's really stood out is, you're talking about AJ, you're talking about Richie, then next thing you know, Rob Wright's living at the rim because, you forget about him. And then Kennard Davis is making a three and so on and so forth. And so when you're able to add high-end talent, it does, if it comes together in the way that we hope it does, it really opens the door up for a lot of other guys because, they're not the focal point of the scouting reports and so forth. And so our hope is that it opens up the world for a lot of our guys.
And Rob Wright showed the cheetah-like speed that he has in the open court last year when he was at Baylor. How much does it help a coach think about recruiting and then utilizing a talent like Rob Wright when you've already coached against him in the same conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's just his ability to understand what this league is like. The gauntlet that the Big 12 is. It's not going to surprise him. That's probably the thing that gives me the most comfort when I'm, laying in bed trying to think about how we're going to do this, or I wake up early wondering, this, that, the other. I mean, having someone who's been there at the point guard position, before is a luxury. And I really liked coaching Rob so far because he's very coachable. He wants to, he wants to get to the NBA, obviously. And so just trying to show him, the things that I think teams in that league value out of that position, and try to share my knowledge with him. And he's been a sponge so far. He's been soaking it all up. And, the fact that he's already done it before in this league is very comforting.
Other than Richie Saunders, which returning player from last year's Sweet 16 team do you think made the biggest jump?
We've had a couple guys banged up this offseason that haven't been able to, in terms of guys that I would go right to on that question. Dawson Baker's a guy who put in you referenced that Wisconsin game. I mean, he had a huge stretch in that game where, they couldn't stop him. So, his similar to Rob, right? He's been there before. He knows what it takes in our league. I expect him to, perform at a high level. Mihailo Boscovich is a guy who he came on sort of to the latter part of the year for us, and gave us some versatility at the 5. And so another guy with great experience, and those guys that we'll lean on as well.
Now, you've referenced a lot of your newcomers here. Obviously, Aj Dybantsa, Rob Wright. You've talked about Kennard Davis a couple of times. Other than that troika, which newcomer will have the biggest impact for BYU in 25-26?
I don't know. I think for me, there's a lot of guys that could grab a hold of that, and give our coaching staff credit. I thought that we went out and brought in some guys who are going to really push to put their hand up and need an opportunity. Like I said, Kennard's probably the guy that I'm the most comfortable with at the moment. But I mean, we went out and got other veteran guys that I think can do it at this level in terms of the Big 12. Nate Pickens, Tyler Maruss, both those guys have looked good so far. Hadim Mbop's the guy who redshirted for us last year. He's come in and looked really impressive as well. And so that's the beauty of competition. We look at it every day, and we're watching our guys compete, and hearing, as you mentioned, it's right around the corner. So pretty soon we'll get to see it against, other bodies, and we'll see who really earns jobs.
Yeah, I'm sure all of that will come out in the wash here during the preseason. Kevin, what was it like going through for the first time as a head coach, coaching in the Big 12?
Man, it was great. There's a lot of high-level coaching in our league, a lot of high-level talent. And so I learned a lot, man. It was, I got just great respect, honestly, for all the coaches in our league, because when you go through a league like ours, especially last year where it was a 20-game slate, I mean, that's a lot. And so, trying to just learn the nuances of coaches' tendencies, style of play, things like that, the different atmospheres, the officiating. I just learned so much about what it takes to win in this league, and that impacted how we went out and recruited and put this team together as well.
Kevin, anytime you're going to be able to have success and then put on top of that success talented recruits like you've done, you're going to get more opportunities to play in higher profile games in November and December. You guys have done that. You open in Vegas against Villanova. You come east to play UConn in Boston, which is essentially going to be a road game. You then come back to the Garden to play in New York against Clemson in the Jimmy V Classic. You're in Orlando for a couple of days in the ESPN Events Invitational. Wisconsin's going to play in Salt Lake City. As a coach, how exciting is it to be coaching in not just some of these venues, but also against the caliber of some of these opponents?
Yeah, I mean, it's what you play for. You want to play against the best teams, the best coaches. But also, if you just look at the way that, and honestly, this is something I didn't have a great understanding of coming into college basketball, was just how important scheduling is as it relates to the NCAA tournament seeds and
Yes.
so forth. So we did a lot of research there, a lot of analytic studies on what that formula may look like for us to give ourselves the best chance to have the highest seed. We felt like we needed to play against some higher end competition, to try to steal some of these quad 1 and 2 wins out of the non-conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where we are trying to take our program in terms of winning basketball games, bringing in the recruits that you've kind of gone through. I mean, the phone lines we're definitely ringing this offseason to try to get us in some of these marquee games. I love it for our school. I love it for our fans that they're going to be able to see us on a pretty big stage.
Now, much like you referenced earlier that BYU fans are everywhere and they'll always travel, the same can be said about UConn fans, especially in the Northeast. And a couple of years ago, they flooded Boston when UConn played there in the NCAA tournament, when they went to the Final Four through Boston in the regionals. What do you think that environment is going to be like, roughly 90 miles from their campus in November when you play the Huskies?
Hopefully it'll be great. Boston's a place on a personal level. I've coached playoff games at the Garden, and I understand what Boston fans can be like. You mentioned the proximity to UConn, so I'm sure they'll flood it as well. Obviously, for us, I expect a fair amount of BYU fans in there as well. Twofold: one with AJ, obviously being from that area, and then the great thing about BYU fans is they don't actually have to travel. They just live in all the markets we play in. And so the whole Eastern Seaboard, anyone that supports BYU, which will be quite a few folks, I'd imagine will have a decent amount of blue in there as well. But look, man, I mean, that's been a historic program for years. Obviously a great coach and great coaching staff and great players, and it'll be a great challenge for our group. And I think for all of college basketball, it'll be one of the fun early season games.
And that is obviously one of the most highly anticipated non-conference games of the 25-26 season, BYU and UConn in November at TD Garden in Boston. All right, Kevin, social media is a real thing. Noise is a real thing. BYU has never had a buzz like this entering a season ever. People want to talk about going to a Final Four, having a chance to compete for a national title. Do you broach those topics with your team?
I mean, I'm the type of person I don't really beat around the bush. I just say it how it is. And so, yes, I've talked about that, and it doesn't mean anything. I don't really, with all due respect, I actually like it. I've used some of your sound bites, if I'm being honest, just in terms of what BYU is supposed to do, this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. I understand, why things are said and so forth, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is our ability to show up every day, try to get better today, and then come back tomorrow and do the same type of work. And that was our attitude last year. And that's how we were able to gradually get better and better and better as the season went on. I think most teams that I've been around who end up doing well, that's the path is like this. It's not this up and down deal, right? You try to just get better and better. And so, like last year, as an example, I think we were picked 9th in the Big 12. It doesn't matter. You got to show up, you got to do the work, and you got to play the games.
What are the biggest keys to BYU being back in a similar situation as it was last year in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, but now having a chance to go further?
I think it really comes down to a couple key points. Number one, we got to be a lot better defensively. That's why we went out and recruited some of the guys that we did. We felt like we needed to get better there, and I anticipate we will be better on that end of the floor. And then we have to continue to play unselfish basketball. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing outside of spacing that I care about on the offensive end. And those are going to always hopefully be trademarks of the teams that I coach. And this group so far has bought into that, but it's just something we have to stay on every single day and keep the main thing, those two areas. I try not to get our guys thinking about too much. If we can do those two things, I think we're going to be able to play with just about anybody in the country. And but again, if you don't show up and put the work in every day with those two things as your sort of pillars, none of it will matter.
That's Kevin Young. Head coach of BYU, Cougars getting ready for arguably the most anticipated season in the history of the program. Kevin, really appreciate a couple minutes. Know how busy you are starting up practice, and I will see you later this week in Provo. And beyond that, look forward to staying connected along the way.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. That's BYU head coach Kevin Young. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.